Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for attending. Lift, thanks for having me. This afternoon, I've got about 30 minutes, so I'm going to take everyone through basically a Hemp 101. So I did a similar presentation in May in Toronto, and lots of good information. I may be going a little too fast, so follow up if you need anything after that. As I get further into the presentation, I'm also going to get into what the new regulatory framework potentially looks like for industrial hemp and how it's going to change industrial hemp and how that'll factor into cannabis at large, and especially this new emerging industry that we have in Canada, which is really exciting. So first off, I'm with Canopy Growth Corporation. It was a bit of a roundabout adventure for me to land at Canopy. So, and you'll see on the next slide, when we get into sort of the history on what we've done with hemp. But in a nutshell, I was instrumental in forming Mettrum Health Corp. In 2012, we formed our original partnership, including myself and three others, and we incorporated early in 2013. We brought in two more partners at the same time, and then we got the third license under the MMPR back then, now the ACMPR, November 1st, 2013, and we grew that company over 3.5 years and merged it in with Canopy at the end of January last year, so not quite a year ago. That deal was a $430 million deal, and it was actually Deal of the Year at the Lift Gala a couple of months ago. So pretty proud about that. But our starting point, when I say I always say our, and that's typically because my wife, Kelly Smith, standing over there, my partner and love of my life, has been by my side since day one. So here we are. It was 1993 that I first heard about industrial hemp, and it was a good friend of mine who originally from Texas, and we met years prior and became very close friends. He was living in Eugene, Oregon, and that was sort of part of the epicenter on the revitalization of industrial hemp in North America. And he sent me a package of information that I literally stayed up all night reading. I was so absolutely mesmerized by what this information had to say. And at the time I was running a graphic design business, and we were looking for a project to do as a promotional to show our talents as graphic designers. And I went in the next morning, having been up most of the night, and I said to our people, I said, we're going to create something that never existed before, and it's going to be produced from industrial hemp. So the eyebrow raise from my group was there because the automatic association with the consumer in 1993 was hemp equals marijuana, and marijuana back at that time was pretty much the devil weed, right? We've come a long, long way, and we should be all very, very proud for that. But that was how it originally started. So we went to work, and one of the challenges that we had, having gone through all this information and then embarking on a 2-year of research and development process, is, and this still exists today with industrial hemp, is what are we going to focus on? And like the facts and figures back then are 25,000 uses from industrial hemp. I believe it. I think there's more than that. And if anyone hasn't read The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herer, it's worth a read. It's absolutely phenomenal with respect to the data and the expose on big corporate and why prohibition happened in the first place. So, having gone through that process of struggling to decide what the heck it was we were going to produce, we zeroed in for a number of reasons, but one of them was nutrition. And hemp seed oil as a food is chock full of omega-3, omega-6, and GLA, gamma-linoleic acid. It also has omega-9. So it's a phenomenally healthy oil when you eat it. And there's an interesting parallel between the healthy oil that form prostaglandins that regulate good health in the body, and now this new endocannabinoid system that was discovered in the late 90s, and how those parallels exist. But So point number one was the nutrition. The second point was, how favorable this crop is from an environmental perspective. This crop is truly remarkable when you look at agriculture today. And agriculture today, unfortunately, is really, really messed up. And, just about every food we eat, if you don't produce it yourself or the grower, and even if it's certified organic, you have to question it. But the food system that we have in North America is probably the worst in the world, and it's alarming as all get up. So hemp represents a pretty significant alternative for healthy eating and for cleaning up soil and things like that. So that's a really, really nice thing. So in 1995, on the top left, you can see we launched Hempola. That was the brand that we went to the street with. And that was what we flew the flag for a lot of years. And Hempola cold pressed hemp seed oil, you can see that bottle, the bottom left, that's a very designerly bottle. We produced a little booklet to go with it, and it talked towards food and nutrition and environmental aspects. And the third point is, why did Prohibition happen in the first place? And we wanted to start to create an expose and create a message out there that Prohibition shouldn't have happened in the first place. So that was the catalyst. That's what got us into it. Then, we had a loophole, and the loophole was this. Hemp was still under the Narcotics Act in 1995 when we launched. But the way the act was written relative to industrial hemp is we were allowed to import either raw fiber from the stem, or we could import seed for bird seed. So we were bringing in containers of bird seed from China in the early days and cold pressing hemp foil from this bird seed. That's how we got into business, through a loophole in the Narcotics Act. So as we observe things with respect to research crops and more going on within Canada, we decided, okay, we're going to get tighter with Ottawa. Ottawa's respecting us because we didn't put the iconic leaf, which had a lot of negative connotation at the time. We didn't put that on the packaging for a reason. We were dialoguing with Health Canada a lot. We were invited up to Ottawa several times for stakeholder discussions and so on. So in 1998, we had our regulations for industrial hemp, and that was the time that we converted everything imported from countries like China to domestically grown hemp. So that's the early days, the starting point. Since then, some of the accolades. In 1998, we invented hemp seed flour. It's the co-product from cold pressed hemp oil from whole hemp seeds. Then we spent 2 years in R&D on a government grant for research and development from NRC IRAP, and we launched the world's first omega-3 salad dressings. You can see those in 1999. And we moved up to our farm. We purchased that property in 1999 and rebuilt a century barn and moved in there in the spring of 2000. And you can see the farm gate sign under the 1999 banner. And then in 2000, one of the things that we found out in early research was I sent a copy of the oil analysis to a chemist friend of mine at the time, and he looked at it in about a minute. He said, "This is an excellent drying oil, quote unquote drying oil." And as it turned out, hemp seed oil was the oil of choice in the paint and coatings industry pre-prohibition. That's when the big shift happened to linseed oil derived from flax. So hemp has an amazing ability to dry on its own. You don't have to add any nasty chemicals to it like you do with linseed oil to dry. It'll dry, and it'll dry really well. And we went through the process, and in 2000, we launched Hempwood Wood Finish. And then, products started to come down the pipe. With hemp oil and hemp flour, we have two superfoods. We have all the omegas in the oil and the beautiful flavor. We have all the protein and the fiber and the carbohydrates, positive carbohydrates, in the flour. So these two ingredients now form the basis for producing all these different products. So we went out, we developed the high protein pancake mix in 2000 and launched it. And then as a sideline project, walking our talk and living the life on our farm, we designed and built out a hemp straw bale home. So you can see it under the 2002. We still live there. There's a nice shot underneath it, a winter scene. And the same year we launched the Healthy Happy Brownie Mix. And that's actually a steel engraving from an encyclopedia underneath the brownie mix under 2002. That's from an encyclopedia that my grandfather had from 1893 called the American Encyclopedia. There's a 4-page section in that book on how hemp was so important in industry at the time. And so pretty proud of that. Then in 2005, this is where hemp hearts were really starting to make a show. We also embarked on developing biodiesel from hemp seed oil, and we went outward under the branding Flower Power, as you can see. And it was a really interesting project because hemp oil has an amazing ability for cold flow application. So what cold flow means is if you put a bottle of olive oil in the fridge, it goes hard, right? So you put a bottle of cold pressed hemp seed oil in a freezer and you leave it in there for a month, you pull it out of the freezer, it still pours, it still flows out of that bottle. So when you convert it to biodiesel, it has this ability in cold temperatures to flow through the motor. You don't have congealing and problems with the motor. And the other thing about the process, bear in mind that we have to cold press oil to mill flour, right? So we get about 25% by weight oil, we get 75% by weight seed cake, which we mill into the flour. So the big controversy over biofuels back in 2007, 2008 was we're displacing all this productive land to grow fuel rather than food. Well, hemp is both. You have 25% going in the fuel if you want to convert all that, but you still have 3/4 of that harvest for food. So it satisfies both. It's a sleeper project. It's well ahead of its time, but sooner or later I think we'll get there with it. A lot went on back in the early days, and leading up to now, it's quite phenomenal. I tell people lately that in the last 4 years, way more has happened than the first 20 years. This is year 25 for us. We're fossils. We've seen a lot. I won't go into too much of the history of hemp right now because we're tight on time. But in 1999, Phil Jenkins with Canadian Geographic magazine wrote a fantastic article. If you get archive it and read it, it's absolutely beautiful, and that's part of a 2-page spread. It's a pretty tattered copy, but it's probably the best assembly of hemp historical facts that you can read. So sidebar that one. In terms of growing hemp, I already mentioned that it's such a phenomenal crop in a crop rotation. And some of the reasons I'll get into in a second, but the timing of hemp is very similar to every other crop that we grow in Canada. One of the tricks in the spring, especially in Ontario where our farm is to be patient in the spring. Really prepare your seed bed, and you can do it all mechanically. There aren't any herbicides being applied to the soil. And wait till that soil heats up. So when that soil gets warm, i.e. the middle of May, the end of May, then your seeds are gonna get into the ground about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deep, and they get that heat, they get nice and comfortable, and they'll pop within 72 hours, and then they just take off and out compete all the weeds. We have grown hemp. As you can see the headline here, 2017 was the 20th year for Canadian hemp. That's since we had our regulations in Canada. But we have grown hemp every year at our farm. And this year, unfortunately, was the first year we ever had crop failure because it was so darn cold and wet. That's the one thing hemp will not tolerate. It is dampness. No wet feet, right? I'm sure a lot of you people who grow indoor, especially, can attest to that as well. You have to be very, very careful with those water levels. So it's the same outside. Excellent profitability. We're seeing probably on average $500 to $700 per acre net profit, and that's just from food. And we'll get into all the multiple bottom lines in a minute. So it's really quite something. Here are some of the attributes from the rotation. So deep taproot. So what the deep taproot does is it drives down into the soil, and it helps to aerate soil. It's breaking up some of those hard pans that are formed by these heavy machines going over the land, harvest by harvest, and for all the passages over the soil. So it's helping to aerate once you harvest. It's drawing up those trace minerals from the soil levels way deep in the soil, so it's leaving them near the surface. So the following crops, for instance, a cereal who has very shallow root systems, can take advantage of those trace minerals that are left at the upper layers of the soil. I mentioned no pesticides, excellent for that. It's also a very carbon-hungry plant, so it's a biomass. So as it grows, and you can literally watch it grow day by day, it's chewing up a ton of carbon. So the multiple bottom lines, everything, it's money talks. So as I mentioned, you're seeing that $500, sort of minimum for the food, but when you start adding the value for fiber, and those markets are starting to kick in. When I say fiber, I mean the fiber from the stem of the plant, and the soon-to-be vegetative material for CBD extraction, all of a sudden you're seeing more revenue for the farmer and obviously a lot more attraction to the farmer. 2017 was a record for acreage in Canada at 135,000 acres, so we're seeing steady increase that way too. Canada is definitely a global leader in terms of reputation and production for quality and variety and so forth in food. So this is Daniel Claret in our hemp field, taken a shot in 1997. 1999. He's been working with us since 1997, but now you have a lot more people coming on, and this is where you can see. So what we're faced with hemp is this convergence with hemp into cannabis at large, and think of it from the edibles perspective as time goes on, and the economic opportunities for the culinary industry, culinary arts, the restaurant industry. It's absolutely phenomenal when you start to think about it. So the starting point with hemp was all about nutrition and flavor and cachet. And now you have the future, which beholds some pretty interesting stuff. Okay, so emerging hemp markets in Canada. I keep talking fiber. So finally, fiber has been one of those things. We've seen a lot of companies come and go in the last 25 years. One in particular is Hempline out of London, Ontario, and they focused almost entirely on fiber for the auto industry. So they were constantly going down to Detroit and pitching. And finally, unfortunately, things take so long. And part of the problem with these large-scale producers is having a guaranteed supply. They're not going to make any changes to massive production lines if they don't have guaranteed supply. So it's that chicken and egg. So now we're seeing emerging companies. So Biocomposites Group, they're based in Alberta. They produce non-woven matting and a whole variety of products from non-woven complex of hemp fiber. Everything from house insulation, and they're also working on car parts, to grow mats, grow mediums, and this sort of thing. The other company, which is now commercializing as well, is Just Biofiber Structural Solutions. So these guys are also in Alberta. This is an absolutely amazing product. They're like giant Lego blocks. They're made from hemp fiber, and they have some reinforcing material in there as well. And they look, as I say, just like Lego blocks. And they're structurally sound. They've passed all the building codes, and they're absolutely remarkable. So look these guys up if you have an interest. And big future for both of these guys. One of their big challenges is supply. They can't get enough fiber to meet their demand. So that's exciting. That's a good problem to have. So let's get the acreage going. Let's get the revenue going. The fourth one on that list is CBD. So this is sort of the sleeping giant from the next wave relative to industrial hemp and how it's going to factor into cannabis at large. There's still a lot of opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, a few minutes ago, with food and industrial products. I mentioned the wood finish, the fuels as well, so strong future for hemp. And again, industrial high volume sectors on the verge, just a little more specifically, industrial oil applications. So I think the paint and coatings industry is ripe, absolutely ripe to look at hemp again, because we're seeing the interest and we're seeing the acceleration in acreage. The food sector, now I say food sector, I mean large volume food sector. So one of the things that we need to pressure government for change is on animal feed, on livestock feed. It's still not approved. Hemp seeds is a livestock feed. If you feed chickens, we've done this, laying hens at our farm with hemp seeds, you get the best eggs you can imagine from these things. And omega-3 eggs are fed with flax seeds, so switch it to hemp. So we need that approval process to happen. Our Canadian Hemp Trade Alliance, which is our national association, has it on their list, but like any association, they're underfunded. They don't have the resources, both human and capital. So these are the things from a longer term perspective that are just going to jettison the acreage for hemp. And then, globally, we're seeing a more and more increased focus on carbon reduction, and hemp just speaks so beautifully to that. It's the carbon sequestering, the eating of carbon, and as products go through their life cycle, and then it's up to the corporations to break all these down. Hemp is going to biodegrade. It's you plow it under if you don't use it when you're farming it. In the U.S., a little bit different. I just put U.S. Up here for a second because I think it's very, very interesting as a comparative. So these are data points from an organization down in the U.S. called Vote Hemp. This is from 2016. So 688 million estimated. That's a conservative figure because the data that they pull, especially at retail, excludes such retail giants as Whole Foods and Costco. So you can take that number and probably add 15 or 20%. But the breakdown on the right-hand side is very, very interesting. So hemp foods of that 688. Bear in mind that Canada is a massive leader with hemp foods, but it's 19% of the total down in the U.S. Health and beauty aids is next at 24%, so that's a huge market that's virtually untapped. Textiles at 14. Now we're getting into some really interesting stuff. That would all be imported. Supplements, things like gel caps with hemp seed oil in it, protein powders, this sort of thing. Hemp CBD, 19%. So hemp CBD out of the U.S. at 19%. It's already equal to food, and food has been marketed down there quite aggressively by companies like Manitoba Harvest and some of the biggies in Canada since 1999, 1998. And if hemp CBD, only since 2014 down there, is already at 19%. Look at the growth curve that's coming out of that stuff. Phenomenal. Dietary supplements, 4%, industrial 18%, and other consumer 2%. So that's a comparative for the States. I was down in Kentucky in September. What a show. That was amazing. So we toured farms and a specific company growing hemp. So their primary focus is hemp CBD. So the interesting facet and the parallel that's down in Kentucky is Kentucky still grows tobacco quite prolifically. And, tobacco are trichomes and cannabis are trichomes. And when we're going after CBD, we're after those trichomes. So they're employing a lot of the growing techniques that are far and away removed from how we grow hemp in Canada. And they're coming out with some really amazing products. So we have a lot to be learned down there. Another interesting thing is they're using exclusive Canadian quote-unquote feral hemp genetics, and I'll tell you about those more so in a minute. But a lot to be learned with the guys in Kentucky. I don't know if you can see it from the crowd there, but that's a half decent close-up of a hemp flower. This was taken in Kentucky. So this variety is probably showing about 5% CBD. And you can see the population of trichomes, the little crystals as you get into the center of that flower. And as time goes on, and the smart companies out there already have, or should have, when I say companies, I mean in the cannabis space, strategies on new varietal developments to ultimately be approved by Health Canada, specifically to elevate CBD. So in my prediction, I think we'll see upwards of 10% CBD, still underneath the 0.3% THC for industrial hemp. That's the ticket to grow hemp, to have it approved in Canada. You'll see that 10% probably by 2021, 22, that sort of thing. This is a shot from Kentucky. On the left is burley tobacco. You can see it's standing about 6 feet tall, and on the right is the industrial hemp. So when you look at it from the eye, first of all, their spacing is a lot different. When we grow hemp for food in Canada, we plant about 30 pounds of seed per acre. That translates to about anywhere from 300 to 500,000 plants per acre. In Kentucky, for CBD production, they're growing 5 pounds per acre, so 1/6 the amount of seed. So they're way more spread out, and they're topping all those plants to create heavy branching. But those flower tops are 2 to 3, sometimes 4 feet long. It's absolutely incredible. Versus our seed heads in Canada, when we grow for food, that might average 18 inches. So big difference. The other interesting thing is they're still pulling off of that, 700 or 800 pounds of seed, along with all of this material for CBD extraction. So early CBD development in Canada, very quickly. So some stuff went on under the good old MMAR program. We were licensed at our farm from 2005 to 2014. It was about 2009 that the CBD project started to get some traction down in the States. And we were bringing in some of our hemp pollen into our medical grow. And crossing it with some of our medical strains with the objective to increase CBD and drop that THC a little bit, make it a little more palatable for a lot of people that can't tolerate high THC. So that turned out to be quite a project. It later formed a relationship with a brilliant geneticist out of homemade, self-taught, out of Northern California, and we crossed some of the hemp and came out with Mettrum Yellow #1, which put Mettrum on the map from the CBD perspective, and Mettrum Blue #1. So that came out of our farm. Green Hemp Industries, this is part of the Canopy Group. These guys are in Saskatchewan. They've done phenomenal work on farm from hemp, from the extraction perspective. So everything from shatter to hashish to oil extractions, all from industrial hemp. Absolutely beautiful. CBD Baker, this is our plant geneticist out of Ontario. He's the guy that brought this feral hemp. That's a separate story. I won't get into it right now. But this is a dream team, really, to go forward with hemp in the bigger picture for cannabis. And this is part of what Canopy has. So, hemp CBD outlook in Canada, we have, I don't know if you guys have probably read, but the consultation document that Health Canada put out in November, they speak to hemp in that document. And we're looking to make the change. Right now with the industrial hemp regulations, we can only harvest stock for fiber or seed for whatever you want to make from seed. We can't harvest flower or leaf material. That's going to change. When that does change, now all of a sudden we have the prospect of field scale hemp CBD. So we can take away all the indoor production of CBD focused strains in the bigger picture, industry wide, and it's truly a game changer. Some of the initial data on a comparative basis, you're looking at 1.3 million milligrams per acre. These are from strains that are 1.5 or 2% CBD, and it's about a 1/10 cost proposition when you compare it to the indoor structure that the ACMPR has going on. So big game changer. I'm going to leave you with this. This is really interesting. So Richard Rose, he's been around the block as long as we have in the hemp space, and he's still pretty active, consulting and this sort of thing. And this is sort of a premise that I've used lately, especially since this whole discovery of the endocannabinoid system and how we need cannabinoids to feed it, and then testing our oil over the years, the hemp oil and Mettrum Originals oil after that for THC, because we're obligated, not so much now, but we're obligated to do that. So I've always believed, because I have a horrible orthopedic history. I have a history of 2 fractured vertebrae, bone tumor here, broken leg, compound fracture. That led to a pulmonary embolism, 2 torn Achilles tendons, broken arms. I don't take any painkillers. I've eaten hemp food since 1995. And, when you test hemp oil, you're going to get everything from, 2 or 3 parts per million upwards to, it's totally illegal, but some of them are testing at 117.5 parts per million. Well, we're using a 20-to-1 ratio here, so you're going to get a multiple of 20 on the CBD when you look at when you compare it to your THC. So if the THC comes in at 3 parts per million on a multiple of 20, that's 60 parts per million CBD in cold pressed hemp seed oil, right? So that begs the question: what do we need in our body for optimum health? Because that's exactly what they had to do through science, prove through science, to allow us to label health benefits for omega-3 on all the food products that you see out there. Omega-3 is an $18 billion industry right now, but it took several years to gain that data to allow us to make those labeling statements, those claims on labels. So we need that to happen with CBD, right? When it does, kick it off. It's just going to go through the roof, especially from a food perspective. But what's interesting here, this gets into a bit of the legality of it, and I'll just read it to you. THC at 5 nanos, 5 parts per million, not 45, and soon 2 nanos in Canada, and many hemp seed oils could contain an order of magnitude more THC than 5 parts per million. We're allowed 10 parts per million under the existing regulations. But if we regulate at 2, then that means that we're creating, Canada might be about to criminalize their hemp industry if we set that threshold at 2 parts per million by eating some hemp seed oil. So these are the things that the regulators need to think about, and these are the things that we need to comment on going forward. We have 1 minute and 15 seconds. Are there any questions? Time will tell, right? Okay, thank you very much.